Good afternoon, dear colleagues. I am very grateful to you for getting together this afternoon. It's been more than 6 months since UNTAC was established here in Cambodia, and that was on the 15th of March. And I thought it would be useful for us to get together for taking stock of how far we have come, where we are, and where we are going, and what are the problems and difficulties we encounter individually or as a group. Many of you have joined UNTAC after the beginning of its operation in March, but those of us who arrived here in March remember vividly when we started, oftentimes without desks and chairs, and very often without air conditioners. And during March and April, which are rather hot months of the year in this country, it was rather difficult. But I observed with gratefulness how my colleagues bore those difficulties with good humor, with devotion and dedication. Of course, their expertise, experience, and knowledge impressed me very much. But more than that, I was struck by the sense of dedication and devotion which was prevalent and which was even infectious. So there was a sense of elation and even adventure when we started off. I would like to express my profoundest gratitude and appreciation to those original Mohicans, as well as to many of you who have joined us subsequently. My gratitude goes particularly to those of you who serve in outlying areas far away from the civilization of Phnom Penh. We should always remember that many of our colleagues have to work in very remote areas, often without electricity, hot water, and sometimes even cold water. And it is very, very hard. Why are we here? I often ask. It may be sometimes for some monetary compensation, but I don't think that is the reason, certainly not the primary reason. When I think about it, I think basically all of us are here to help with the peace process here in Cambodia, which have suffered for the last 22 years from incessant war and fighting. when I visit areas of cantonment of troops of three factions, I am struck by the strong and deep yearning for peace among Cambodians. It is quite clear that they are sick and tired of fighting, and they want to build a new society, a new country based on peace, conciliation, and democracy. And the sense of helping them, sharing in their determination to create a new society is, I believe, at the base of our motivation for being here. We have achieved quite a lot in the last 6 months, ladies and gentlemen, and we can be proud of what we have accomplished. In the area of human rights, many important international human rights conventions and instruments have been ratified or acceded to by Cambodia. Just 2 days ago, at the last SNC meeting, additional 4 treaties and 1 protocol was signed by all members of SNC. I think there's better protection of human rights and fundamental freedoms. Political prisoners have been liberated insofar as we know. We have proclaimed guidelines of international conduct in the area of human rights. How about elections? After having discussed, I think quite thoroughly with the Cambodian parties in SNC as well as bilaterally and otherwise, we proclaimed the electoral law with the agreement of the 3 of the 4 parties. And on the 5th of October, we'll be starting registration process, which, as you know, we have every intention of finishing by the end of December. We will be deployed at the height of election with the help of 400 UN volunteers who will be deployed to 200 districts all over Cambodia. We will have additional 1,000 international electoral monitors. In addition, we will be assisted by 56,000 Cambodians who work with us. So I have every confidence that we can go ahead with free and fair elections for the Constituent Assembly by next May at the latest. How about maintenance of law and order? Here we have very able, dedicated civilian police from many nations with us, and by the end of October we will reach our intended strength of 3,600 civilian police, who will not replace local police in their law and order responsibility, but who will monitor and supervise whether the conduct of the local police is in accordance with international standards. I think our civilian police do contribute to the maintenance of stability, and they do help in the repatriation of refugees, and they join our military in border checkpoints. Their responsibilities are many, and they are working hard. Our efficiency and effectiveness in the control of civil administrations of factions has been a somewhat controversial point. It has been controversial because our deployment has been delayed by slow recruitment of qualified personnel. But here again, we are deployed in 5 domains for direct control. Here in Phnom Penh, foreign affairs, national defense, finance, information, and public security. We are also exercising somewhat indirect control and supervision in many other domains. And we have our people fully deployed in 21 provinces. So our shortcoming in that area has been now rectified. The 5th domain is military peacekeeping domain. The largest number of our colleagues are in this work. The man checkpoints on the border with Vietnam, Laos, and Thailand. The supervised cantonment of troops of 3 factions who have cooperated with us, and 25% of the 200,000 soldiers have been cantoned, some of whom have gone on agricultural leave. But when the 4th faction does decide to cooperate with us, cantonment and disarmament will proceed to 100%, and at least 75% of them will be demobilized at the end. Also, our military are patrolling all countryside, and in this country where banditry has been a traditional problem, there's no lack of challenge for our military. In addition, in 2 other domains, we have been working hard on the basis of general voluntary contributions. One is the repatriation of 370,000 Cambodian refugees from Thailand and elsewhere. Initially, there were many difficulties, and it was very slow to repatriate Cambodians to their homes. But in the last couple of months, we have acquired and accelerated in the speed of repatriation. And we have repatriated about 1/3 of refugees, that is over 110,000. Some of you were in Samron Station when 100,000th refugee has returned, rather in a dramatic atmosphere. The last item is the rehabilitation and reinconstruction of this country, where, as you know, the international community, over 30 governments and over a dozen international organizations joined together in pledging in Tokyo $880 million for Cambodia. This exceeded Secretary General's appeal of $600 million by more than $200 million. This kind of thing had never happened in UN history. It was very pleasing to us, and Cambodian leaders representing 4 factions who attended that meeting were deeply moved by this tangible evidence of international generosity and sympathy for the difficult situation in which Cambodians find themselves. So in all these domains, we have done a lot, and we have every reason to be proud of what we have done. And I would like you to know that I am very proud of what you have accomplished. We have done a lot, but expectations for our performance are very high, sometimes perhaps excessively high. So if expectations are very high, even our accomplishments may seem sometimes minuscule or rather modest. This is the task and challenge we are faced with. Perhaps we are the victim of over high expectations, but I will come back to that. We have accomplished these things not without some cost, some sacrifices on the part of many of us, our colleagues. I think many of us are physically tired and exhausted, and more so perhaps spiritually and psychologically. Many of us are away from our families, from our children, in an alien environment without amenities and comforts to which we are used, away from our friends and relatives. And this can last for several weeks and even several months, but after 6 months, it gets a little bit tough. I know that, and I feel that we are facing some crisis even in our morale, which has been extremely high, and comparative to other peacekeeping operations, very, very high indeed. Many observers who have come here from other UN field operations have remarked how high our morale, how efficient we are. Perhaps morale has been relatively high and the complaints have been relatively few because we had no time to complain or think about our difficult environment. But there's no denying the fact that they are difficult. And it gets tougher when the situation does not improve visibly even after 6 months. Now, towards the end of the rainy season, there seems to be increasing signs of illness and some diseases. The malaria incidence of malaria has been reported to be quite high, especially in the north. Some communication problem with local population have been also reported. We increasingly hear critical comments from local people or in the provinces. There are complaints about UNTAC contributing to traffic accidents or traffic congestion. The law and order and the crime situation is said to be getting worse. Rampant inflation is attributed, and I think this is quite wrong, to UNTAC. forgetting the fact that, in fact, inflation started before UNTAC even launched its initial operations in March. Some behavior of a very small minority of UNTAC people, both civilian and military, has been pointed out and has been characterized as general behavior of entire UNTAC personnel, which I consider to be very unfair. But there are these problems, psychological, physical problems, and there's no denying that there are some problems of communication and understanding with Cambodians, our hosts, and we'll have to try to overcome these problems individually and through action as UNTAC, as such. I'm sure all of you are concerned about the refusal of one party among the 4 parties in the peace process, that is the Party of Democratic Kampuchea, to cooperate with the UNTAC. They have refused to give free access to us, and they have refused to canton and demobilize their troops. They often express opposition or strong reservation to issues which are brought for discussion at the Supreme National Council, SNC. They have returned last week to the Mixed Military Working Group in Phnom Penh, and some of them do participate at the MMWG at provincial or local levels. So in the last couple of weeks, perhaps the temperature has gone down, politically speaking, and there are some encouraging signs. But I am yet to see the sign of change in the basic attitude of the DK leadership. But Paris Agreement is based on the cooperation and consent of all 4 parties. We have to continue our patient efforts to convince and persuade DK that it is in their basic interest to cooperate with UNTAC and with 3 other parties in this difficult transitional period, so that they will be part and parcel of a new setup for Cambodia next year. Some countries like Thailand, Japan, and China have been working quietly whether there's any point of compromise with democratic Kampuchea. But despite their good efforts, we have not seen tangible evidence of progress as yet. Starting next week at UN headquarters in New York, Security Council members, Secretary General, the 2 co-chairmen with the Paris Conference, France and Indonesia, Prince Sihanouk and the representatives of 4 factions will continue their talks in our continuing efforts to find happy solution. I will be joining them in New York. It is important for us not to give up. It is important for us to persist. And it is above all vital that we do not lose faith in what we are doing. Only by persisting in our determination to continue the good road in which we have come thus far, that we will make the most important contribution to this peace process. There's no need for us to change or modify or revise our basic stance or our basic methods of work. Our strength is in our unity, in our efficiency, and in our steadfastness. And our best comfort and encouragement and strength comes from the absolute solidarity which exists in the world community behind UNTAC. As you know, all the decisions of the Security Council and the General Assembly concerning UNTAC have been unanimously taken without any exception. So we have the support not only of all Asian countries, not only of all members of the Security Council, but all countries of Africa, Europe, North and South Africa, and all other island countries. This is our strength, and we should capitalize on this. Now, I'd like to discuss with you some problems which we encounter. I said that there are complaints from some Cambodians and from some members of the diplomatic community, not too many, but there are these complaints and criticisms about a small minority of our people, about traffic, crime situation, inflation, etc. My economic advisor, based on his exhaustive study, states quite convincingly that UNTAC may be a factor for inflation, but it's not a major factor. And very small revenue based on taxation, and the gap between expenditure and revenue produces deficit, which compels the printing of more money than is justified. That's the basic cause of inflation. The crime situation. Something ought to be done by us to encourage improvement in the crime situation. But as I said, the question of banditry is endemic to this country and some of the neighboring countries. With the combination of civilian police, military, and others, we should be discussing and consulting with local groups and authorities as to how best we can cope with it. With local groups and authorities as to how best we can cope with it. At the base of this issue, of course, is the abundance of arms of all kinds, many of which are illegally in the hands of individuals and groups who should not have these arms. But our civil administration control perhaps has also contributed to a certain diminution of authority among local administrations. And local administrations may consider that some areas should be dealt with by UNTAC, while UNTAC feels that they should be taken care of by local administrations. So there's this vacuum of authority which might be exploited by illegal elements. But by closer communication and cooperation with authorities of four factions, we should be able to reduce, if not eliminate, this vacuum or gap of authority. But it is true that with our abundant number of vehicles and our different methods of driving, perhaps we are a factor in traffic accidents. But the problem is exacerbated by the fact that many of us cannot speak Khmer, cannot understand it, and also the way to deal with accidents is different. Those of you who came from the United States perhaps were told by your lawyers never to say, I'm sorry, or I apologize when you are involved in an accident. That is admission of your guilt, your lawyers told you. But in the Cambodian culture, the first expression at an accident is expression of contrite, expression of regrets over the accident. And then you talk about monetary and other mundane matters. So there's an element of cultural difference which we have to honestly recognize and try to solve. Here, I think there's a great need on our part to be humble, to be understanding of difference in culture and in approach and in customs and habits. One very experienced diplomat who has been a very close observer of Cambodia for the last 22 years. So let's not take their smiles as expression of satisfaction to what we are doing. It might be just expression of politeness, resignation. It may even hide disapproval or discontent. So we have to be understanding. There's no escape from the fact that we have to work with Cambodians. We have to help them. We have to facilitate in this difficult process of Cambodians to put their country together. They have been divided by 22 years of war and fighting. And I'm struck by the depth of their mutual distrust. This is more than distrust. This is mutual hostility even, and bridging the gap of this hostility will take a long time and much effort. I don't think it will be solved by the middle of next year when UNTAC's term will come to an end. In its wisdom, Security Council may decide on some kind of UN presence even after UNTAC is terminated. Probably Cambodia needs some reassurance, some guarantee that UNTAC's legacy for democracy, human rights, and other important institutions will not be wiped out. But it is too soon to talk about future UN presence. We should set our mind on the tasks which are in front of us, which are many and numerous. And in this process, I think we have to continue our efforts, our sincere efforts to make friends among Cambodians, to work with them, to respect them and their culture and their habit. I know that some military contingents have been more successful than others in the so-called civic activities. To the extent that your more official duties and tasks permitted, I think it is important for us to organize more and more civic activities. I know that some civilian police are teaching English. I express the hope that they are teaching real English, not Australian English or some other type of English. But anyway, I appreciate efforts to teach English or French. The need is there and desire is there. I'd like to conclude my talk by saying that despite our frustrations, our occasional problems, and our own complaints and complaints we hear from our colleagues and from Cambodian colleagues, we are on the right track. We are doing something very important, even vital for Cambodia, for its future, and for peace and stability for entire Asia, because Asia cannot be stable and at peace unless Cambodia, which is at the nexus between ASEAN countries and the Indochina states, is itself stable. And now, at the end of the Cold War, at the end of the rivalry among major powers, any Cambodian faction which still wants to continue fighting and war is sadly mistaken and overtaken by events. The language of this last part of the 20th century is peace, peaceful discourse, democracy, and mutual understanding and cooperation. And demand for UN peacekeeping, as you know, is everywhere. And UNTAC, despite the problems we face, is often cited as the shining example, as the model against which other peacekeeping activities should be judged. If we think that we have problems, think of Yugoslavia, think of Cyprus, think of Somalia. You would feel somewhat happier about Cambodia. Our burden is great. Our challenge is great. But I think we are on the right track, and we have every reason to be optimistic as to the ultimate objective and our ability to attain these objectives. In the next few weeks to come, Security Council will be very active in consideration of Cambodia and achievements, records, and challenge of UNTAC. General Assembly will be pondering over our next 6 months budget. I think we have to strengthen our mutual ties of communication and understanding. We have to also ameliorate our relationship with local population and the citizens. I do not want to be excessively disciplinarian or puritanic, because I'm not a Puritan. I enjoy life and comforts of life. I do not want to impose a century life to hot-blooded 18-year-old soldiers who have come out of a difficult 3-week mission in the jungles. I think these people deserve some drinks, some merriment, some singing and dancing. But I think we have a right to ask them to do it in places which will not disturb the peace and quiet. We have a right to ask them not to park their white UN cars in front of certain places of questionable repute. If they visit certain places, I hope they will do so not in their uniform. But this is a matter of common sense and good judgment. Let's not be too strict, too disciplinarian, but at the same time, we have the right to ask a small minority of our colleagues to sully the good reputation of UNTAC as a whole. Let me, in short, thank you very much from the bottom of my heart, my very sincere gratitude for what you are doing.